Sometimes the loudest manipulation says nothing at all. You walk into a room and suddenly the energy shifts. They don't yell, they don't criticize, they just stare or turn away or go quiet at the exact moment you needed to be heard. That's not a coincidence. That's control. Silent control. Carl Jung said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." And often, they don't control you with what they say. They control you with what they withhold. Affection, validation, presence, approval. You say something vulnerable, and they change the subject. You ask a question, and they let the silence stretch just long enough to make you second-guess yourself. You feel like you're overreacting, like you're too sensitive, like you're always the one trying to fix the mood. But what you're really doing? You're absorbing the emotional weight they won't carry themselves. This isn't a mistake. It's a pattern. It's how they maintain power, not by attacking you directly, but by creating a space where your own mind does the attacking for them. You start wondering, did I do something wrong? Are they upset with me? Should I apologize? But they never say anything. They just sit back and let the silence eat you alive. Because silence is the perfect weapon. It's clean. It's deniable. It's effective. You can't prove it. You can't confront it. And worst of all, it makes you feel like you're the problem. That's the trap. It's not what they say. It's what they don't say. The looks, the tone, the carefully timed silence that keeps you off balance. They know exactly what they're doing. They've learned how to manipulate without a single word, because words can be challenged. But silence leaves you defenseless. Not every manipulator needs to yell. The most dangerous ones never raise their voice. They don't need to. They've learned the art of withholding. And what they withhold isn't small. It's the lifelines of emotional connection, affection, validation, support, clarity. You bring up a need, and they fall silent. You express hurt, and they give you the cold shoulder. You ask for closeness, and they disappear, not physically, but emotionally. They go vague, they go quiet, they go absent. And in that space, you start shrinking. You begin editing yourself. You second-guess your tone, your timing, even your worth. You think, maybe I'm asking for too much. Maybe they're just overwhelmed. Maybe it's me, but it's not you. It's tactical silence. Carl Jung warned that what remains unconscious controls us, and this kind of silence works because it pulls your unconscious fears into the room. The fear of rejection, of being too needy, of being abandoned. And here's the worst part. They never have to own anything, because they didn't do anything, right? They just needed space. They just forgot to respond. They just didn't feel like talking. But that's the move. Withholding just enough that you begin chasing their approval, trying to earn back a connection that they're strategically withdrawing. This is called emotional starvation. They don't feed you anything toxic. They just keep you hungry enough to keep coming back. They don't attack your identity. They let your own mind erode it. And because it's quiet, because it's subtle, you can't name it. You can't prove it. You just feel it. You feel smaller, less confident, more careful. And every time you reach out for honesty or connection, they pull back until the act of reaching becomes shameful. This is how they control the dynamic, not with force. At first, it feels like nothing, just a weird silence, a text left on read, a vague answer to an honest question. But over time, that nothing becomes everything. You find yourself stuck in loops. What did I do wrong? Are they mad at me? Did I say too much? Should I just stop asking? That's not curiosity. That's psychological warfare. This kind of manipulation spreads like smoke, subtle, suffocating, and hard to trace, and it shows up everywhere. In romantic relationships, you feel like you're too much for asking for basic respect. You stay silent to keep the peace. You walk on eggshells just to maintain closeness. In friendships, they make you feel like a burden when you're vulnerable. They say things like, "You're so dramatic," or "You always take things too personally," then disappear when you need them most. In families, it's the classic cold shoulder, the "I'm disappointed in you" silence, the nonverbal punishment that turns love into a performance. And in the workplace, it's the ignored emails, the meetings you're left out of, the feedback that never comes until it's too late. Carl Jung said, "Loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important." That's exactly what silent manipulation does. It isolates you, not physically, but emotionally. It makes your voice feel uninvited. It makes your needs feel excessive. And worst of all, it makes your reality feel like a problem. Because once they've conditioned you to fear silence, they don't need to say anything at all. You'll do it to yourself. You'll self-censor. You'll overcompensate. You'll break your own boundaries just to keep things normal. But here's the truth. That silence isn't neutral. It's curated. It's timed. It's used. And the more you tolerate it, the more you get trained to abandon yourself. If you've ever found yourself apologizing for asking basic questions, if you've ever walked away from a conversation feeling smaller, confused, or like you're the crazy one, then maybe it wasn't you. Maybe it was silent control. Don't stay in the fog. Hit subscribe and join a space where we break the silence, not with noise, but with truth. Your voice matters, even if they tried to make you forget that. The first step in breaking silent control is to recognize that the silence isn't neutral, it's strategic. They don't forget to answer. They delay to create tension. They leave gaps so you fill them in with guilt, shame, or fear. This is how they gain control. You start managing their moods for them. You walk into a room and scan the air like a weather report. Are they okay? Is this going to be one of those days? You become hyper-aware of tone, posture, eye contact. But here's what they don't expect. They don't expect you to stop playing. They don't expect you to stop tiptoeing, to stop adjusting, to stop making excuses for their lack of clarity. And when you do that, when you stop rewarding their silence with your obedience, you begin to reclaim power. You start with simple shifts. Call it out. I notice you're going quiet when I bring this up. What's going on? Name the pattern. I feel like I'm always the one trying to fix things when we're disconnected. Hold your ground. Don't rush to fill the silence. Don't apologize for asking honest questions. Don't shrink just because they won't speak. Carl Jung said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." So use their silence as a mirror. Ask yourself, why does this silence bother me so much? What part of me still seeks permission to speak, to feel, to exist? Because the truth is, the people who use silence as a weapon are often terrified of their own voice. They've never learned to express directly, so they use absence as pressure. But that's not your job to fix. Your job is to stay connected to yourself, to your truth, to your boundaries, to your voice, even when theirs goes quiet. And here's the unexpected twist. When you stop chasing their energy, you'll feel the fog start to lift. You'll remember what it feels like to speak freely, to ask questions without fear, to sit with silence, not as punishment, but as peace. When you stop reacting to their silence, you begin to notice something strange. They become uncomfortable. Why? Because the dynamic is shifting. The control they had, the power they held by saying nothing and watching you scramble, it starts to fall apart. You don't rush in to ask what's wrong. You don't soften your truth to keep their attention. You don't overfunction emotionally just to keep things stable. You're still. You're grounded. And they don't know what to do with that. Carl Jung said, "He who looks outside dreams, he who looks inside awakens." And now you're awakening. not to who they are, but to who you are when you stop bending for silence. You begin to recognize their patterns, withdrawing right after you speak your truth, delaying responses to keep you unsure, responding only when you're compliant again. But instead of shrinking, you start observing. You stop taking it personally. You stop making it your responsibility to repair what you didn't break. Because now you understand something deeper. Silence can be manipulative, but only when you're afraid of it. And you're not afraid anymore. You've sat with your discomfort. You've stared down your insecurity. You've faced the part of you that once begged for approval, and you didn't flinch. So now, their silence doesn't control you. It teaches you. It shows you who's willing to meet you in clarity and who only engages when you shrink. This awareness doesn't make the pain vanish, but it makes the path forward clear. You begin to reclaim your space, your pace, your energy. You respond when you want to, not out of guilt, not out of panic, but from choice. This isn't the end of the story. This is the reclaiming of your center, the quiet beginning of a louder, freer, more grounded version of you. The moment you no longer fear their silence, you win, not because you've defeated them, but because you've stopped defeating yourself. You're no longer locked in an endless loop of, what did I do wrong? You don't chase vague signals. You don't contort yourself into smaller shapes just to fit into spaces that shrink you. You've built something stronger than approval. Self-trust. Carl Jung said, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." And now you choose. You choose clarity over confusion, presence over performance, power over panic. You've faced the silence, not just theirs, but your own. The silence where your truth lived. The silence where your voice was waiting. The silence where your anger, your boundaries, your clarity were buried under years of self-editing. And now they speak, not in rage, not in desperation, but in calm power. Because the loudest thing in any room is a person who knows who they are and no longer waits for someone else's permission to exist. The manipulators, they'll try again. They'll go quiet. They'll withhold. They'll test your balance with a glance, a sigh, a delay. But now you see it for what it is. Noise without meaning. You no longer dance for crumbs. You don't bend for connection that costs you your peace. You don't fear being misunderstood because you've stopped misunderstanding yourself. This is where control ends. Not with a confrontation, but with a decision. You will not play a game where your silence means submission and theirs means power. You speak. You stand. You walk away when clarity isn't welcome. And most of all, you stay grounded in your own presence, the kind of presence no one can manipulate. Not with silence, not with absence, not with fear. Because once you know your voice, you can sit through any silence without losing yourself.